Welcome to Correction Day. If you watch this stream all the way to the end, you will find out what's going to rally outside of Ethereum. Everyone's talking about Ethereum, but there are other coins. There are other layer ones. And what are they? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned to find out. Now, let's start off with Bitcoin. Bitcoin rallied over the weekend. Not a surprise because there's rotation trades. What does that mean? Well, you know, Bitcoin goes up and then somebody takes altcoin profits. Bitcoin goes up and people take Bitcoin profits and roll them into altcoins like Ethereum. Ethereum leads all altcoins higher. Duh. That's why you haven't had alt season to date. And then when everybody makes money on altcoins, what's the rule of thumb? Well, you go stack sats and you buy Bitcoin. Okay, so they did that over the weekend, and Bitcoin prints 123, and everyone on Twitter's euphoric, only to see the market correct Monday morning. So everybody takes profits right before the Bitcoin ETF guys show up and are forced to buy at much, much higher prices than when they went home on Friday. So a huge, huge, huge win for the crypto guys. Now, what you have to start asking yourself is, first it was all about Bitcoin, then it was all about Ethereum, and the question is, what's next? Because something is next, right? This rotation trade, right? We're watching it as we're seeing. So what's next? Well, it's got to be XRP. It has to be, because it's fast money and it's underperformed. You know, I got a whole list of coins here for Patreon people and YouTube member later on today, but we can give you a preview. What about Avalanche and Polkadot, right? I mean, ETH, what is it? It's a layer one. So why can't all layer ones take off? And XRP has layer one functionality. I just think it's got to be XRP because every other big coin has kind of gone. Well, maybe except for Solana. You could have Solana and XRP going together because everybody has written off Solana. And frankly, that's absurd. Everybody wrote off ETH at 1,400. I know a really smart guy who sold the first bounce in ETH to 1,800 because it was all going to zero, right? And bought Solana instead. Solana did nothing and ETH tripled. You got to fade the herd. When they tell you it's over, it usually isn't. It's not, right? Bitcoin this morning, when it was going to like 123, everybody was probably thinking 140. Not true. I think what you got to start doing is start looking for, like I said, you know, what's next. Now, before we do that, just some information about the macro side of the world. U.S. debt just crossed $37 trillion. Heidi ho. Hedge funds cannot get short enough in the stock market. They were all bearish and got squeezed, and now they're back again, right? And who knows, people may be joining in on Twitter. Thank God when I was negative on crypto, I turned it around in a day. And I know I've said this before, but this is an awesome lesson. When you're wrong, you're wrong. Just get on the right side of it, turn around, and get on, you know, the right side of it. So hedge funds, all bearish again. Now, speaking of all bearish, does anybody remember the orange man and his tariffs ruining the world and sending us into a recession? Well, that does not appear to be the case, right? It appears that he was actually able to make deals with people without wrecking everything, at least for now. At least for now. So what was everybody saying in April? Recession. What is everyone saying now? Now, let's talk about the Fed cutting rates. I think Jerome Powell has got to do some minor rate cut because housing doesn't work. You know, there's all these houses for sale and no buyers. The labor market stinks. You're going to have a September payroll report and all kinds of revisions. And the best case for him to do it is that the whole integrity of the Fed is going to get questioned if he doesn't do at least some dovish talk, right? To say, okay, next thing we do will be an interest rate cut. Now, what does that mean for crypto? Well, as I said, crypto is probably buy the rate cut talk, sell the rate cut the rate cut fact. Soon as Powell steps up to the microphone, sell, if not sooner. Now let's talk about selling. Everyone wants the market to go up only, right? Everyone wants 2021. Well, you actually did get a little taste of 2021 with how ETH moved, and how alts followed. But when you get red days, those are the days to get involved and go shopping, right? I've got the shopping list for, like YouTube member area live stream tonight around 5 o'clock, chain links on the list, Avalanche, Polkadot, right? And then some smaller tokens like Lido. And for all you meme guys out there, believe it or not, from the Gann model, Pengu made the list along with Pepe and Doge. Right now, Pengu is a big meme coin. So are Pepe and Doge. Now, I think in order for that to get going, you're going to need Solana. And you may get Solana, and if you don't, you're going to get XRP. In other words, XRP tried to make a new high today. It tried to actually get it going, right? They actually bought any dip, and XRP is still up with everything else down. Now, when you have these reversals, right? If you have a reversal where something shoots up and comes back down again, but it doesn't fall apart, right? Like sellers, bag holders, if it's a coin that's down, when bag holders sell or when it rushes up and comes back down and it doesn't follow through. See, that's the key thing with XRP on a TA level. That's why with XRP up 1% along with Bitcoin. Why is that happening? Because it's fast money. Now, Bitcoin Cash is also fast money, and that's up again this morning, and that's never a good sign. Because even though I love me some Bitcoin Cash and some Monero, every time Bitcoin Cash goes up, the market kind of gets spanked, which is what's happening now. I'm telling you, all these guys who sold XRP at $3.50, if it takes out $3.50, I ask you one simple question. Who's the seller? Okay, yeah, Ripple does have a lot, but why would they stop it? Why would they unload on it again? I don't know. I don't think there's any reason to do that. They need price hype. They need everyone outside the XRP army talking about $4 and $5. The XRP army wants to talk about that. I'm just wondering who the seller is if the thing goes back up, because there certainly is a case to take profits in ETH. Okay, so where would that money rotate to? Well, last night it rotated into Bitcoin. You have XRP, and then you have SUI. Altcoin Daily was featuring Cardano. Not ridiculous. I mean, Cardano doesn't have the huge use case that Cardano fans wish it did. But you also got to look at other layer ones because they're fast, right? INJ, Caspa, right? These layer ones that are quick. They're quick. So, again, if you just got here, you want to stay tuned because we're like slowly going through what is outperforming in the market, like Goldfinch, right? Real world assets, Ohm. A lot of coins are up this morning with the market still down. And you know what? A lot of them are real world asset coins. Interesting, when you have banks inevitably coming in here, like Curve Finance and Lido, We're on our report for today. Later on in the day, we'll be going through the ranking of which coins we like best. In other words, what's the ranking of this coin? T-Bone did very well in Circle. And, our analyst, Toby, that does a lot of talking in that YouTube member area, she has a pretty strong opinion about, who's going to do better, crypto stocks versus crypto, right? But that doesn't mean crypto stocks are going to do terrible, particularly if all these hedge funds get squeezed, right? Somebody dumped 50 million of XRP. That's a lot. That's a lot. And you know what? If these guys can turn around and take out the high, that's a statement. It's a statement that they can't break it. Right? And of course, the XRP army absolutely loves that. Let's turn our attention to AI, because the valuations in AI affect the valuations in crypto. If you can have individual stocks in equities trading at 4 trillion, you can have crypto as a whole trading well above 4 trillion, which is where it is. And that's mainly Bitcoin. Okay. Altcoins, like, in other words, everything outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum is only at 1T. That is way too cheap. Now, for anyone who is old enough to remember, my father took me to the original Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Terminator, right? And I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube, but it was a very scary movie at the time where, artificial intelligence, they didn't exactly agree. They didn't exactly agree that the human race should continue as is, right? And then, some very scary things happen. Now, why am I telling you about this? Well, the guy who made those movies said, what's going on in AI is not fiction anymore. Like, what happened with AI in the Terminator movies, is not fiction. Now, again, you're sitting there going, Bill, what does this have to do with crypto? And if you stick around, I will tell you. If you have these big companies borrowing billions, they're going to borrow $1 trillion, and they're going to do things that aren't exactly safe because they're in a hurry. Like, because they, in technology economics, they think it's winner take all. Right? That's why they're moving the way they're moving. There's only going to be one chatbot, supposedly, right? In the future, there's only going to be one AI winner. So if that's the way they're behaving, what about the decentralized world? Like, has anyone even asked why ETH took off the way it did? I mean, yes, the ETF guys drained out a ton of supply, so it was a little bit of a supply shock. Okay. But, you can run all of Web3 on ETH and its layer 2s. Has anyone thought about ETH being a symbol for the decentralized world to the point where I can sit here and geek out and come up with, huge reports, large cap and small cap? Guys, you can go to Banter Bubbles. You can go to like 900 market cap or 800 market cap and start looking at these charts. Because you know what's funny? You know what no one talks about anymore? No one talks about what's the next 50x? What's the next 100x? I mean, everyone thinks that happens in meme coins, and it does. Of course it does. But it can also happen in other coins. It can still happen because everyone wants the decentralized universe, or they will, because we're going to go full James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger. People are going to want what goes on in decent. And some of these coins have done absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Everyone's like, oh, I missed everything. No, bro, you missed Bitcoin and Ethereum. But if you start looking down the market cap chart, you haven't missed anything. Like, we did some of this on Friday. We're like, a lot of the big layer ones weren't even worth like 10 billion. I think that's about roughly what Solana is worth. The US government owes $37 trillion. And Solana is trading at 10 billion. That's crazy. That's ridiculously undervalued, right? Because this AI thing, is going to become a bubble. It is. They're going to build data center upon data center, and eventually they're going to have too much. It's not today, but and the funny thing is, everybody thought the orange man was wrong about the tariffs, and I see that Nvidia and AMD are going to pay us 15% of whatever gets sold to China. The guy's just having his way. Now, eventually, this probably is going to create a problem in 2026, but it's not creating a problem now. And everybody was the other way on this. And everyone's saying, oh, it's alt season, it's alt season, and alt season. Okay. Go in the chat and name three alts, that went up that can still go up besides XRP, right? Everyone's assuming that this can't happen. It can happen. Everyone assumes like boomer coins like Chainlink can't go up. Dude, every time I do something with the Gann model, okay, Chainlink comes out. Chainlink can go to 50 or 100, right? Because it's software that literally everyone is going to need. And then there's all this ETH-based DeFi that's showing up, right? And the liquid staking tokens. Everybody blew that off. How can you blow that off? You can't. Not anymore. Because, ETH will probably go to 4,000 and just sit there. This is the other thing about ETH that no one's telling you, right? ETH goes vertical, and when ETH consolidates, it just consolidates in like a tight square. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to buy a dip in ETH. Yeah, dude. Hopefully you get one, because you might not. You absolutely might not. And that's probably going to frustrate people. Everyone wants a dip. You had the dip. It was called 1,700. It's actually $13.99. That was the dip, right? You have to ask yourself the same thing about things like XRP, right? I'm here looking at the XRP chart, and they sold XRP relentlessly down to 276, right? XRP retraced 50% of the last up move in a matter of days. Like that last move was days, right? Wrong again says ETH, AERO, and Solana. Dude, AERO, DeFi on ETH and base. Right. T-Bone is also reminding you that if you like the morning market update via the shorts feed, you should hit the like button, because I got news for you. Who else is giving you a market update on the shorts feed at this time of the day? Eagle King waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get this done. Now, I'm also pleased to tell you that although I was featured as, the influencer, the small influencer of the year, a person called the Blonde Broker actually won. Interesting that she has 131,000 followers. That is a lot more than I do. But I was nominated out there because of people like you. Now, is the Bitcoin uptrend going to continue? Is it? Okay. I would argue not now. Not now. Because altcoins are not done going up. And I think gold and silver aren't done going up either. Right? Because there are so many coins. Like I'm looking at synthetics, DIA, UMA. In other words, the DeFi data platforms. And the other thing about Solana that I keep bringing up, they got the Solana phone coming out, and all of DePin runs on Solana, right? This decentralized physical infrastructure, sharing computer power, cloud. Why is everyone giving up on that? I mean, there are real world asset plays out there. Like everyone's talking about Block. Block is the new Ondo in terms of hype. I think real world assets is primarily hype until BlackRock shows up and does something. That's just me. Now, I'm working with a bunch of guys on real world assets. Oh my God. Fingers crossed that works out. But again, nothing has happened in that area. Nothing. Nothing has happened in AI. Nothing has happened in RWA. DeFi on ETH has a pulse through AERO, but what else? Right? And if you look at all the coins underneath ETH And then you look that, XRP is probably going to do better than Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin goes to 123 and kind of runs into a wall. Okay. Oh, Dietz is right. Dude, don't listen to Arthur Hayes anymore. Listen, he was hot this year and he scared me when he dumped ETH at like 3 something because he saw the stock market like I did, right? I know what he was looking at, but the difference between me and Arthur Hayes is that, thought leaders can't turn themselves around as fast as guys who talk every day. Guys who talk or traders, like trader could turn himself around in 10 minutes, right? I got to turn myself around on the next show because he had to buy his ETH back at 4,000. I was like, oh my God. Maybe he'll have a better chance with Pepe, but he was the guy. You see, this is a classic example, right? When does the market really go up? When the guys who are bullish somehow wind up getting short and bearish. Not only do they get bearish, but they get short or they dump their positions. And that's what happened to me. And I was like, oh my God, somebody made fun of me on Twitter. I know I brought this up already, but listen, when you're wrong, when new information comes out, right? That's an even better way to look at it. It's not just that you're wrong, it's that new information has come out. Sometimes you have to do this with stocks, AI, or whatever. Then you go, oh, wow, I got to turn my whole view around. Patricio likes to sow. Sir, I appreciate you. Notorious love out there. David, Zepedes, Matthew, T-Bone, Mojo, Ben from Down Under. Appreciate everybody who is watching this morning. Volatility is going to increase with a Bitcoin breakout. Get ready. Okay, that's a good point. Big boy could lead us all. That's possible, right? In other words, if they print 125 or 130, that's going to scare people, right? It's also going to sell. It's also going to scare all these shorts in the stock market. God, those guys, like I bought into that. It's led by 7 stocks, 7 companies, or 8 or 10 or 20 companies, right? It's like it's going to go down at some point. Meanwhile, crypto is just too cheap. It's just too cheap. Okay. Demetrius Jones, what about XLM? Dude, every single stream, we talk about the ISO 20022 coins. In other words, the made in America cryptos. Do not fade these coins. XRP and Cardano could lead them. And then Hedera and Algorand and all these layer ones, right? I was talking about layer ones to start a show, right? Like, what does ETH moving mean? What did ETH moving in 2021 do? It started this insane layer one season where, venture capitalists would throw something out there that had DeFi. All the DeFi would move from one, it was like ETH to Solana to Avalanche to Phantom, to the point where, it was really funny. Guys were like, oh, I'm not onboarding on DeFi with ETH. I'm going to onboard with Phantom. Okay. Phantom's a good coin. But, there was this like, I'm not doing ETH snob thing back in 2021. It was kind of funny. Okay. Meanwhile, ETH reveals itself as the ETF, really as the ETF king. Because again, how did this happen? You got to pay attention to legacy, right? These guys, or TradFi, or whatever they're calling it these days, because these guys came out and said, you know what? It's cheap versus all the other tech stocks. They don't care if there's no killer application. You got DeFi on ETH. We just talked about some of them. Now, of course, how you rank those coins, well, you're going to have to tune in later or on Patreon. When me and Toby discuss it, we'll probably discuss some of these coins, but, we haven't discussed the small coins. No one's talking about the next 50X. It's weird, right? Everyone's like, oh, ETH, 5,000. Dude, this is when you go shopping. Everyone's like, alt season. Okay. But what about the small alts? Why is no one looking there? Because again, you got, everyone's like, oh, I want a real world assets play. What's the market cap on it? Oh, I don't know, 100 million? dude, you got to go find something there. You know, there's a lot of DePin and AI related plays, as well as lending, good old fashioned lending. You know, some of these coins are at 30 million. Well, maybe they're not now, but they were like 35 million or 30 million market cap before this started. So it's like, why is nobody, like, if you have something that was way up, collapse, and then just like starts popping through, starts popping up again, that's the bigger the base, the longer it sits, the higher into space. No one on Twitter is talking about that. They should be. Okay, we were doing 30 minutes today. That is the market update. We will see you later on.